Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this guy right here. This is the James brand Barnes pocket knife. First off, though, I want to thank James Brand for sending this guy along. As always, I told him I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They did still send it along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever. And I'm doing my best not to let this affect the nature or quality of my review, and I'm trying my best not to pull any punches, so to speak. Next thing, size comparison. Here it is against your Spyderco Delica and your Ontario Rat number 2. And what we're going to see here is that this is actually a reasonably large knife. Here it is against a ruler, which will show you that the measured blade length on this guy is going to come in just under 3.5 inches, which is, below a legal line. Then here it is against this Spyderco Paramilitary 2. See here, it's a little bit smaller in the handle, a little bit longer in chop and blade length, but blade length overall-wise, very, very similar. So, it is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a small knife. Next up, what the heck is James Brand, right? Who's James, anyways? So James Brand is a company that they've been around for a while, but I haven't spent too much time on them. Did some review very, very early on, but unfortunately, it was kind of disappointing. But they've come a long way in terms of their knife making, in terms of the quality and that kind of thing. And this is very much evidence of that. But they are a company that is really focused outside of the conventional knife community, outside of the EDC space, and really trying to bring people into that world. And so I think a lot of folks don't spend as much time thinking about them in the knife world, but I think they're building themselves quite a presence. And then presence, that is. And then finally, I want to put this out right at the beginning here. The price on this guy is $600. We will be talking about that later, but I don't want people to rage quit halfway through the review once they get there. If that's out of your range, then it's out of your range. But anyways, let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting knife right here. So to start with, this isn't about the knife itself, but I really do appreciate James Brand's focus outside of the knife community monoculture, right? This is a beautiful thing. By going after people in other communities, by going after people who may not think of themselves as people who would carry a knife, they are absolutely doing us a big service. They're targeting people outside of the fold and bringing them into the world. And so if this or one of their other pieces is somebody's first pocket knife that pulls them into the brands that more people know and love, I think that's a wonderful thing. And they're really targeting, I think, pretty well people whose first instinct might not be to carry a knife at all. They're people who might be otherwise scared to. So they're marketing to a different population than most of the knife companies are, and I think that's a wonderful thing. That's how we grow. That's how we become, well, frankly, a more diverse and a more I think a more societally accepted group. So I very much appreciate the fact that they're not marketing directly to the same people everybody else does, and I think that's a wonderful thing that they're bringing to the table here. Next thing, the case on this guy. I don't generally talk about boxes, but this is a little over the top. It comes in a little slip case. Then inside the little slip case is a little box. Inside the box is an actual chunk of wood, and I think the wood right here must explain the price. And it also comes with a little coin, James Brand, modern, minimal, everyday carry, and then on the other side, analog artifact. Some things will never go digital. This is, of course, created by computer, but we're gonna set that one aside. But either way, it's kind of a cool looking box, right? And the knife fits very well into it. They've done a nice job with presentation. I think it came with a lanyard, but nonetheless, they did a really nice job with presentation here, and I can see them channeling some of the other sort of luxury good worlds in doing that. So there you go. Next thing, one of the things that makes this knife interesting is that it is an integral pocket knife. The majority of pocket knives out there in the world still are, folding pocket knives certainly, are made up of multiple pieces, right? Where you've got one side scale, the other side scale, and something in the middle joining those things. This is not like that at all. This is made with a handle out of one entire piece of titanium here. There is not any division here. It is just one chunk of titanium that's been carved out in the middle, basically, and then they cut in the lock bar, etc. With the clip in the back here slightly different. This is an interesting thing, right? An integral pocket knife design is, in my estimation, a beautiful thing, and I think it works very, very well. And there are a lot of niceties to it, especially both in feeling of solidity as well as with carry. You've just got a smooth surface up out here against everything else in your pocket here. That is a very nice thing, and I appreciate it very much. Next thing, this does have some very nice details to it. It's very clear that whoever's doing the design is doing good thinking here. I mean, to start with this texturing that we're going to see here, I'll go ahead and I'll zoom in a little bit, but what we've got here is a texturing that is very, very subtle, right? It doesn't look particularly subtle, but it actually is. The way that they've done this texturing is very good, and that it provides a lot of gription for you, but at the same time, it's not grabby in the sense of it's not going to attack whatever's in your pocket. It doesn't, I can do this with relative comfort, right? It's not a particularly harsh texture, but it is a very effective one. It gives you a lot more gription to it. I like that very, very much. The area under the clip, though, is untextured, which is a beautiful thing, right? They've put an area here, a patch where that texture is not present. And this means it's much easier to get into and out of your pocket as you slide the fabric up there. It's a very common new mistake, and I'm really glad they didn't make it here. That's a beautiful thing. Next thing, you'll see that as a lock bar insert. That means the very end of this lock bar here is a separate piece of steel. This is going to eliminate lock stick and potentially allow a little bit more adjustability for them at the factory, but it's a beautiful thing. It also has this little area here, which in addition to covering up the stop pin, that is that little bit here, which needs to be inserted somehow in an integral pocket knife, it serves as an over-travel stop, meaning that you cannot push the lock bar accidentally too far in this direction. And on an integral knife where you can't very easily you can't at all, take the two halves apart and rebend the lock bar that way, that is a beautiful thing. And speaking of the lock bar, they have done an internal lock bar relief here, meaning that it is on the inside of the knife rather than on the outside. What knife do I have here with an external lock bar relief? Let's see. Here we go. This right here is a Monterey Bay Knives EZC 2.0. And what we see here is the lock bar relief is on the outside, leading to a little bit of a breakup of the lines there. So, it's not a big deal, but it is definitely an aesthetically nice choice and leaves the thing feeling and looking very minimalist, which I appreciate very much. And, overall, I gotta say, it's just very nicely designed in all of those little ways. You have two different finishes on the blade here. I'll wipe it off, see it's a little more apparent. But you've got a bit of a satin kind of belty finish over here, and then you've got more of a bead blast, a very light bead blast finish down there. That's a very nice thing. Hold on, I'll clean the blade off here. I've been using the little dude. But nonetheless, what we see here is just a lot of nice little details here. It's very clear to me that somebody at James Brand spent a long time thinking about the details here, and that really does matter. I think that is important, and at these kinds of price points, they can't do anything but that. So that's a beautiful thing. And actually, one other thing I want to highlight is the clip on this guy. A lot of people look at these holes on the back, figure, oh, okay, they put the screw in there. No, this is actually the lanyard hole. You can put a lanyard through here altogether, and then that works. You can have a lanyard on this guy. In reality, the way that the clip goes in is with this screw, which is actually inside the handle here, inside this. So if you want to remove the clip, you twist that, and then you can just pull the clip right back out of there, which is actually really, really cool. The reason I say that, like functionally, is it any different than other clip approaches? No, not really. It attaches the clip well, but what you don't see anything of are screws, and you see a lanyard hole in the back here without, punching a hole through anything. It's a really nice approach. The clip itself is pretty good, too. With a relatively deep carry, it's not so deep, but a relatively deep carry. Very attractive look, and being a nice wide clip means that you have very, very nice ergonomics. This feels very, very good in the hand, which is good. And actually, the action on this guy is also quite good here. This is a thumb stud only knife. There's no flip a tab or anything like that, but it works very well. I'm going to use no wrist at all here. And we're going to see that it comes flying open with absolutely no resistance. It is a very smooth action running on bearings. And you know what? Yeah, the action here is great. They've tuned the detent well. It works very, very nicely. It is a very nice bearing thumb stud action. And is exactly the kind of smoothness one would expect to see. The fit and finish is also there as well. As we see here, we have a dead centered blade on this guy. We have very, very nice jimping here on the top. I probably should have mentioned that in the details section, but either way, that's very well done here. The blade on it is very good as well. What we see here is we have a blade here with some M390 is the blade steel. I think it says that, yeah, right about here. M390 right at the top there, and then the other stuff is manufacturing identifier numbers of some variety, they told me. So there is that, but it's M390 steel, which is a very, very good steel, if not the best there right now for the pocket knife world. It's a great contender. Has a very nice grind coming down to a relatively thin edge, and on on both ends, which is nice. It has this additional swedge to it. You know, it's not just a flat part here. It's got this little bit of crowning on the top here, but it's not in such a sharp way, and it's certainly not sharp end. It's just, it looks very, very nice. And then it's got itself a nice big sharpening choil here, which will make this guy easy to maintain in the long term. It is a very, very nicely done blade, and I appreciated that very much. Next thing, the ergos. I already mentioned this briefly, but they are just good. This really feels great in the hand. This rounded backside is really nice. You've got this nice big flat clip here. You've even got these little details here, like this little bit of, note this isn't just an angle chamfer, this is a bit of rounding at the very edges on both sides of this knife. This just really works great in the hand. I appreciated the ergos on it very much, and actually cutting with it, and then this little part here acting as a thumb ramp, along with the jimping, along with the texturing. This is really well designed. And then finally, the carry on this guy is just so damn nice for a bunch of reasons. Partly because it's actually not all that huge in the pocket, right? If I put this guy up against the Spyderco PM2, what we see here is that this is a remarkably smaller knife, although, you know, the PM2 is not exactly a space-efficient knife in the pocket, but with this deep carry clip, as well as with this relatively thin profile here, as well as with this smooth and rounded back here, this is just a joy in the pocket. It carries very, very subtly. It carries very well, and they've done a really nice job of it. It carries like a freaking river rock, I believe, is Tony Skull and Breeding of Everyday Commentaries line. It's not about this, of course, but it's very, very nice in the pocket. This was a knife that I enjoyed carrying as much as I enjoyed using it. So to me, all of that is the good here. It has a super nice carry, stellar ergos, a good blade, great action, a nice clip approach, a very different clip approach, some nice details, an interesting design, a wood case, and a focus from the brand generally outside of the knife monoculture. On the great side to me, the thing that really blew me away about this knife is that it is a really good all-around piece, right? This is not a super specialist knife, but it is done exceptionally well at all of sort of your general cutting needs. It's very nice to carry. It's very nice in the hand. It's got a very nice blade for cutting things. It is just a joy of a pocket knife. Carrying and using this knife made me happy. Not like in the grand existential sense that you can only derive from within, but just generally speaking, this was a very, very nice knife. It is a very good utility tool, and it is just really well done too. As an object of, well, frankly, manufacturing, this is excellent too. And relative to some of their past work, this is miles and miles ahead, and that makes sense. They're using a very good factory here. They're using Rayot knives. I probably should have mentioned that earlier on, but nonetheless, this is a very, very good piece, and it is the best knife that this brand has ever made by a mile. And frankly, putting the price aside, it's one of the better knives that's been made this year. So this is a really great all-around pocket knife that even for me was an absolute joy to carry. That is, to me, what is great. On the bad side, a couple little details. I mean, to start with, when the knife is closed, there is this little tiny bit of text that's hanging out of there and breaking up the otherwise very, very clean and minimalist aesthetic. Is this a big deal? By no stretch of the imagination, but I'd like to think that there's a way that they could have hidden that a little bit more, and so they wouldn't have that weird little thing. I'm nitpicking, but rest assured, I'm going to nitpick at this kind of a price point. Next thing, lime green, zombie green, thumb stud? Really? Really, guys? Okay, I don't get it. I don't get that choice. But at the same time, it was either this or there was a DLC black one, which, I don't know. So, not a big fan of the Z-Hunter stud, but that's something you can change after the fact if you need to. Next thing, speaking of the thumb stud, it is absolutely in the slicing path. What I mean by that is, as I am slicing through something, there is a very real possibility that that thing, as I'm cutting through it, will come and will make contact with that thumb stud as I cut in. And that's not something that's ideal, right? That is one of the disadvantages to a thumb stud knife rather than, for instance, a hole opening or something like that. And so, the thumb stud is definitely there, and for some kinds of cutting, that will be inconvenient. Mind you, I think it works pretty well because, it works acceptably because when you are holding this guy in a saber grip, your thumb's going to be there anyways, but nonetheless, it is something to consider. Next thing, this guy has a blade that is a little on the thicker side, right? The thickness of this blade is definitely up there. They've done a good job of grinding it down a little bit, but I think the knife would have been a little bit better had everything been slimmed down just a little bit more, particularly in the blade. And not because it's a super thick knife. By the way, it really isn't particularly. If I put this guy up next to the Delica in thickness comparison, it's not all that different. But nonetheless, I just like seeing thinner blade stock wherever I can, and this feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity, but not the end of any worlds. Then finally on the bad side, and more on the dumb side than anything, this isn't really that bad, but at $600 it kind of is. As I showed in the disassembly, this guy actually shipped with a bearing that was missing a bearing. Right? This is the original one I pulled out of there. I told them about it. They were very embarrassed, sent me a new one, post-haste. But nonetheless, that's not ideal, right? I don't think this has any functional effect on the Pocketknife, right? There is still more than enough bearing supporting the thing there, but this is something that, especially if you're going on this super high end of price, the factory really needs to be very careful about. Again, I didn't notice until I took it apart, but still, that's not a great look as you being in this kind of price. But they made it right, so okay. Not good, though. Hopefully they'll do better with that in the future. And to be fair, that's the first time I've ever had that happen in any knife on my table, so I'm assuming this was just a lightning strike thing. But whatever, not a big deal. We'll talk about, so that's the bad to me, is that it was shipped with a missing bearing in one of the bearing races. The blade is a little bit on the thick side. The thumb stud is in the slicing path. It is Z Hunter green for some reason, and they do have that little tiny bit of text sticking out where it doesn't need to be. On the ugly front, design-wise, this knife is really, really well done, but there is one big piece of ugly, and that is the price tag. This is a $600 Pocketknife, according to James Brand. And, for those of you who are in the knife world, that probably came in pretty high because it's way above the competition. This is about $200 more than your average Rayot-made integral frame lock knife, right? Usually those kinds of things fall around $400, $450. I mean, there are some that have gone higher than that, right? Not just from Rayot, but from other companies. But generally speaking, it's not great when they do. And there have been some that have landed much lower, right? I've seen Rayot made integral frame locks for $300, the BRS Eon, for instance. So this is just very, very high in price relative to the competition. This is at least $200 more than most of the competitors' work, and it's made the same overseas factory to the same standards. Mind you, they're good standards. The knife is really well done, but they haven't really shown me a reason for this extra $200 here, right? I mean, the design is good. The clip approach is very neat. I wouldn't say it's $200 neat, but still, maybe if this were a beautifully inlaid thing or something like that, or it had a Damasteel blade or something, I could see $600, but I gotta say, even though I unabashedly love this knife in terms of being an object, I can't give you a justification for that price tag. It is just ugly, and I think they just missed the price outright. So to me, that is what is ugly. $600 is just too much money for this particular pocket knife. On the final conclusion front, this knife was a really hard review to write and to do because it is so very good as an object, but with a huge asterisk in that price tag. And it is good, right? Because it's got a brand that's focused outside the knife community norm. A nice case, a nice design, nice details, a nice clip, great action, blade, ergos, carry. All of those things add up to make this a really excellent performer as an everyday carry knife. The downsides, there are some nitpicks there. The thumb studies and the slicing path a little bit. Blade was a little thicker than needed. It was missing that bearing weirdly. But most importantly, it has a price that is completely disconnected from the rest of the knife market. And honestly, that price is the elephant in this knife's room. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but the community reacted very strongly to that price. Perhaps more so than most other really expensive gear of late. Posting this knife on like Instagram and whatnot, there was a lot of hate and vitriol, and it was honestly kind of like, ew, what the heck? Frankly, it was really unreasonable. I mean, people, it's a pocket knife. Calm your pivots. Worst thing you do is don't buy the damn thing. But I think a lot of folks in the community saw the price as not just high, but as insultingly high, or even maliciously so. And especially given that James Brand has I don't know, they were often viewed as being a bit of an outsider in the knife community. Coming in with that, I can see how it would read wrong. But I don't attribute this to malice or ill intent, just miscalculation or maybe a failure to read the room. Maybe they don't have a good sense of the competitor's price point, so they thought they were landing in reasonable territory. Or maybe they do believe that this James right here is worth $200 in the same way that other brands in the EDC space at a massive premium above the quality, cost just for a lasered-on crown, a bear, or something like that, right? But no matter the reasoning, the fact is that the price is the biggest issue on a knife here that is otherwise absolutely excellent. And with a very different number, this would be a very different video, right? This would be an unqualified gem if this had landed closer to, 400, 450, been in line with even some of the competitors. But as a reviewer, this puts me in a really awkward position because there is no straightforward conclusion here, right? And somebody's going to be unhappy. Well, it's the internet. Someone's always going to be unhappy, but, there's no way to make everybody happy with one recommendation. So this knife, functionally as an object, final conclusion, without any kind of a price tag attached, is a shining gem. At the right price, I would recommend the heck out of this, and it would be a strong contender in the high-end knife of the year category. This is a very good object. And if you have, as a result, a sort of relationship with money where the difference between $400 and $600 really doesn't matter much to you, then you will enjoy this knife very much. It will be a gem for you. And for somebody outside of the knife world, which I think really is where James's really main thrust of their marketing is, I can see this appeal because they want a knife that is as nice as their other luxury kind of items, right? That'll match their fancy computer, their fancy car, their fancy phone, their fancy coffee maker. I can see this appealing very well in that world, right? It could be their one nice knife, and they could be very proud of it and very happy with it because it is a very nice knife. And I think even for everyday carry fanatics like myself, this was a knife that I enjoyed having in the rotation, that I liked carrying. Even given my collection, even given the options I have, this is a very, very good knife. And so if money doesn't matter to you, if the $400 to $600 gap doesn't hurt you, then by God, this is not a bad place to put some money, right? But that said, for the majority of my viewers, I think value does matter here. And this is, there's a lack of that, right? Considering the price point, considering the competition here, it takes this knife from being a potential knife of the year down to not quite a gem, right? It is very, very good, but I just can't use the G word at that kind of a price point, right? And I'm saying, given what they've done here, they could have earned it, but, they would have had to go even more above and beyond to get there, right? And I've heard from a bunch of folks out there, and I think behind a lot of the haters right now are people who love what's going on here, who love the knife or want to love the knife, but just can't do that price point, whether in terms of finances or in terms of principle. And so as a result, I think a lot of people are looking at that, it's like, oh man, I like that, but God, what did they think in there, right? And so if your goal is just to get a high-end knife at good value, then you can get amazing pieces for far less than this guy, right? You can get two amazing pieces for the price of this, probably from the same factory. So look, if value is a concern, I would recommend that you hold off here and either hope that James drops the prices or maybe you buy used. The first one takes the hit. That's a really good way to deal with those kinds of markup-y brands anyways, right? But obviously, then if you just want a good pocket knife, if you're watching this thinking, should I get a pocket knife? This is a lot of money, right? There are a ton of choices that could be your one and only for a fraction of this cost. So I guess my final conclusion here is sort of, well, James brand, this is your best design by a mile here, right? They've done something that is really, really excellent in every domain but one. And so provided that you lock whoever came up with the price number for this guy in the supply closet as you decide the pricing on the next one, I'm really optimistic about the future of the brand. This, at the very least, is James brand telling us that they are really good at making knives, or at least they're really good at designing them, right? And so this kind of build quality with these kinds of excellent design details could make you a very strong player, not just outside of the knife community, but within it as well, if you're able to address, meet us in the middle a little bit on the price point. But ultimately, for you, the consumer, the people watching the video, the knife is amazing, but your relationship with money, as well as the perceived value of this text right here, is going to make the decision, I think, more than any other factor here. I totally get why many people won't go there, but I think if you do buy it, and especially you can get a great deal on it, you're going to love it, bar none. Okay, anyways, hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.